Hello, welcome back to the Ultrascape podcast. This is episode 4. It's April. The sun is finally shining. My name's Josh Ibbett, and I'm joined, as always, by Beccy Waters. Hi, Beccy.
Hey, Josh, good afternoon.
How are you doing? You look very cold. You've got a hat on. It's going to be sunny now.
That is because I haven't washed my hair. You
Oh,
were
I
not
see.
meant to comment on that. Thank God this is a podcast.
That's on YouTube as well. So sorry for our listeners who can't actually see that Becky's wearing a rather fetching woolly hat. What have we got coming up this week then, or this month then, Beccy?
So this episode, we're going to dig a little bit into a couple of the races that have happened, are happening at the moment. Although one's not actually a race, it's an Audax, it's Grand Guanche. It's their gravel edition in the Canary Islands, the Iditarod 1000 that finished since our last episode, and the IndyPat wheel ride. We'll also dig into a bit the races that are coming up, which are the Unknown Race and the Dales Divide. There's also an announcement of something called the UK Triple Crown. And then Josh is going to talk us through the Traka, because that's a fast gravel race and that's much more your domain, Josh.
Well, I ride fast gravel races quite slowly by the the general standard nowadays. But there we go. That's a nice discussion point for later on.
And we'll finish off the episode talking a little bit about the recent news of the sale of Komoot and how that might affect the wider bikepacking world.
Before we get any further, though, we still have a sponsor. 4 episodes in, they've not given up on us just yet. So a big thank you to Redshift. As you probably know, they do various kind of components for your bikes. If you're watching on YouTube, you can probably see these rather cool, fetching, they're kind of like riser dropper bars, help get your hand position pretty high, which can be useful if you maybe don't want to put a load of stackers under your stem, or as Beccy just pointed out, she's got a bike that's quite small and she wants higher bars and can't get them higher. So yeah, loads of cool little things. They do actual bags that fit on these as well as things like the shock stop seat post and the stems, which I just used at the weekend on my bike, and they're going to be on my bike for the Traka. So yeah, a big thank you to Redshift for the ongoing support, and they've got a little discount code to get 15% off if you're interested in ordering anything. I'll put it below in the show notes. The discount code is Ultrascape, and I'll put a little link up on this screen somewhere if you're on YouTube. So you can click on that and get yourself some nice riser bars. Are you going to get some, Beccy?
Do you know what? I just got excited then when you said that they do bags, because, and you won't know this, Josh, but down here in the world of people under 5'7", it can be quite hard to fit a bag on a set of drop bar handlebars that doesn't just bounce on your gravel tires. So having a riser bar is a solution to that.
Yeah, and the other good thing about these is that because there's like a flat section on the front there, the bag actually stays a lot more stable, so it doesn't swing around underneath. So it's a clever little product. I mean, it looks a little bit quirky. It might not be to everyone's taste, but when you sort of get into it a little bit, it's pretty good.
So much space for lights as well.
I know. But anyway, we're not here to talk about funky handlebars. We're here to talk about bikepacking. Not been many races kind of finished this month, but we're right on the start of the busy time of the season. So we've got a few races which are kind of underway at the moment. So first of which is the Grand Guanche.
Yes, the Grand Guanche Audax Gravel. Like I said, it's across the Gran Canaria Islands, and it does hop between the islands. And part of the event is getting onto the ferries between the islands. We're talking at the time that the mid-pack is coming through. Most of them will be coming over Mount Tiede. Is that how you say it, Josh?
Teide.
Teide.
Mount Teide, Tenerife.
And then they've got one final island after that, and then it's all over. One thing that Grand Guanche does have is they have that Audax pace, and if you get to the finish in a certain time, then you get your entry fee back, Josh. And something that I picked up on their social media was that one rider, Jens, is just about to become the first rider to make it in the Audax pace while also wearing sandals.
Yeah, I must say Jens is a great guy. He's a bit of a character as well, and he's, if you've been watching the Tour Divide coverage of the last couple of years, he's definitely a bit of an outside favourite, I'd say, for Tour Divide, and he's going back again this year. But he'll always stand out because rather than using a standard cycling helmet, he just wears a rock climbing helmet for his races. So yeah, it's kind of, he does stand out. So I'm not surprised that he's become the first guy to get Audax base wearing sandals. other races, or the other race that was ongoing when we last spoke was the Iditarod Trail Invitational. Now the 350-mile version had finished by that point, but the 1,000-mile all the way to Nome had not finished. And well, there was a bit of a sprint finish in the end, so I think it was 7 riders across the line together. There's actually quite a funny video on their Instagram showing the finish, and they'd obviously all decided that they clubbed together. They sort of found each other in the last kind of however many 100 miles, rode into the finish together, and they'd obviously made an agreement to ride it across as a group. But some people were definitely trying to be the first across the line out of that group just to say they've won. So yeah, it was one of those classic group finishes where there's still a winner. But anyway, that race is finished now. And also interestingly, there was what they call the Triple Threat Club. So the Iditarod Trail Invitational is not only a fat bike race, it can also be done on foot or snowshoes, and also on skis. And there was only three people before this year had completed that as the on the 350. But this year, 2 others have now done all 3 on the 1,000-mile event. So that's Josh Brown and Petter Inman. So yeah, that's a pretty cool feat, isn't it?
I think it's incredible to have done 3,000 miles at least across the Alaskan winter in various disciplines.
Well, even just, let's break that down. Firstly, if you finish that race 3 times on a fat bike, that'd be pretty cool. Then to ski it as well. But then this is the one, like walking 1,000 miles in the snow. Jesus, how long does that even take? It must be months.
I think it can take up to a month, and that's what's really beautiful. Is it's one of the few races where you see the full lunar cycle. And out there as well, there's so little pollution that you really see it.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, I'm definitely a very fat bike curious, and it's definitely something I would like to do, and maybe that's something to do at some point. But yeah, I've got to ride a fat bike in the snow first, so we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. What else has kicked off this month then?
Well, a long way from the snow of Alaska, we have the outback of Australia, and ongoing at the moment, but the first couple of riders that have just come in over the past day or so is the Indian Pacific Wheel Ride, or just the Indy Pack. The first finishers in, their name comes up as Spud Crisp, and this gets me onto my first whinge of the podcast, is the habit of Aussie and I think Kiwi riders inputting nicknames into map progress. So it's really hard to find out who actually these people are. And they come up with some wacky nicknames.
Maybe they just don't want to be found out.
Well, there is that. I try a bit too hard to find them sometimes, I think.
So Indy Pack, and obviously it's we should probably mention as well, it's the 8th anniversary of the death of Mike Hall. He did lose his life on the Indy Pack, a couple of days ago, as we speak. So yeah, can never forget Mike and everything he's done for he's almost basically created a lot of this world, and we certainly would be doing this without Mike, I wouldn't have thought. So yeah, talking about the Indy Pack, it's only fair that we do mention Mike and remember him as well. We
do have a British racer out there at the moment. His name's Lawrence Walters. Anyone who's followed the Pan Celtic over the past few years will know him, and he did actually make a film because he has done it all on a fixed bike. And he's currently attempting an unsupported circumnavigation of Australia, which I believe would be similar to Lachlan's ride, although his is unsupported. And even more differently, Lawrence is doing it on a fixed bike. He's known to many people as Loz, so he's called this the Tour de Loz.
I like that.
And effectively, the first leg of the circumnavigation is just the Indy Pack. And once they get into Sydney, he'll just keep on going round. He's not even halfway done at that point. I think it's going to be about 14,500 kilometres. Oh,
Jesus. That's a bit of a drag on a fixie, isn't it?
Yeah.
But good luck to him. Is there a tracker for him? Has he got his own tracking page?
He did, but I think it's disappeared for a moment.
Probably during the Indy Pack. But yeah, keep an eye out for that. It'd be good to see how he gets on. And then other just little bits of news and a bit of gossip. Joe Nation has he was winner of last year's Silk Road, and he was 3rd at Tour Divide the year before that. That was the first year that Justinus and Uber had their kind of battle, and Joe came in a comfortable 3rd. He's going back to Tour Divide again. Looks like he's pretty hungry to to take the win there, and I think it's probably possible.
Would he have been one of the men who sat in the Portaloo?
No, that was Jens.
Ah,
Yeah, who we just talked about in the Grand Guanche. So Jens is obviously going back as well. We know Robin Pele is going back, and there's a couple of others on the. There's no official start list, but there's kind of a spreadsheet that circulates of people who've shown interest. So Joachim Buringer, he's a super strong rider. I've raced him a few times. He's definitely way faster than me, but he can be a little bit kind of sort of unreliable over the kind of the week mark. And yeah, a couple of other riders that said they want to go under 16 days. Zachary Moore-Boyle and Francisco Sevilla. Yeah, Tour de Field is starting to shape up. And of course, we know Lair Wilcox is going as well. So yeah, it's going to be a good watch come June. So we'll be doing plenty of podcasting around that time. So keep an eye out for us, get subscribed, and make sure you don't miss any of those episodes.
Back over in Europe, Lost Art recently reopened applications for the Transcontinental. So anyone who missed out the first time or was a little curious but didn't quite make the application deadline can now enter. They had their Women's 100 campaign, and they did take 112 applications for women, but they've had a few dropouts, so they're now down to 92, and they would love to take over the 100 mark again. The applications are open to everyone, but there will be preference for Flinter riders. And if anyone is a little unsure or a little curious, Lost Dot released one of their recent Women Who Race podcasts with Hannah, the race director, interviewing Jana Kessenheimer, one of the racers, and she was the first woman last year, all about Jana's journey into bikepacking racing, and it just made it all sound quite doable. Certainly if you're not aiming for first woman, and that I think would be quite good to listen to if anyone is interested, even if you're not a Flinter rider.
Yeah, and I think it's worth saying on these things just from personal experience that it is scary the first time you do something, but unless you try, you'll never know. And the TCR is a very supportive kind of community too. So yeah, get those entries in, and that's going to be rounding up to be a good race as well. Certainly the women's race with Lael going, Jana's going back, I believe.
Jana's going back.
Is
Cara Dixon's going.
Is Jamie going?
Carson's going. Jamie's going.
Yeah,
they're all going.
I think the women's race is going to be probably much better to watch than the men's race.
Yeah.
And then Justina Slovakia he's going to the TCR this year as well, so that would be great to watch.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're looking forward to that as well. It's going to be a very busy and good summer. And just another bit of news, finally, on another race run by the Lost Dot is the Accursed race. That's one I took part in last year, and it takes place in May this year. So that's around the Balkans, so Albania, Montenegro, and Bosnia. But it's going to be on pause in 2026. So they're going to run 2 editions. They kind of said that they're going to be maybe reevaluating the route, potentially putting some more sections in there, which would be really good. But this is a good opportunity for us to just speculate anyway that there'll be a different race in 2026. Morocco. Whether that's fact or not, I don't know. But yeah, interesting to keep an eye on what Lost Dot are doing. Obviously, they're doing some great stuff and some great races and great initiatives with the 100 TCR women. So yeah, follow those guys on all their social media channels, and yeah, we'll be talking a lot about their races over the coming months. So yeah, what have we got coming up in April then, Becky?
Well, April feels like it's really the start of the season now, especially in Europe. The first race that we have coming up is the Unknown race. And you might be wondering how we're going to talk about this, considering
we don't know.
We haven't got a clue. But what we do know are things like the roster. So the route is typically 1,000 kilometers. And in the past, it started in Vienna and Nice. But this year, it heads a bit further south. It starts in Lucca in Italy, which is in Tuscany, and I suspect will be beautiful. Where it finishes, where the control points are, how many control points there will be, how much elevation there will be, nobody outside of the organisation knows, because that is
when does it get released? Is it?
So the first control point gets released an hour before the start, which is at 7 a.m. on the 17th of April. So at 6 a.m. they'll all get the coordinates of the first control point, and then they have to plot their route. So there's no route preparation that they can do before this.
That's pretty cool, actually.
It's really interesting, and I'm curious to know how people plot their routes, because I think I've seen one of the official race photos of a guy sat on a tablet, And I wonder how many people actually carry something like an iPad or a tablet to be their route design or their route planning tool, because on any free route race, we all know how important a good route is. So whether you take the penalty of that added weight and space of an iPad and accept that it will save you time if you've put an extra however many minutes into your route planning, or whether some people just smack the coordinates into their Garmin and follow the Garmin wildly.
Yeah, well, I guess it's probably one of those things where taking a bit more time early on is probably going to help. Does it go off road? Can you go anywhere you want?
I think it's similar to TCR.
Yeah.
In that it's mostly, you would consider it an all-road event, and you
But
might.
if it's starting in Lucca in Italy, then that's in prime, kind of Strada Bianchi territory. There'll be some of the white roads, no doubt.
True.
Do they have parkour sections, or is it purely CPs and coordinations?
I think it's mostly coordinates. I think it
Yeah.
is.
Oh,
But
that'd be cool.
actually, no, I think there is also parkour, but it's still mid-April. So certainly last year we saw in parts of the Alps that they had to bring the control point down the mountain because it was just so snowy up high.
Yeah. And if you watch I know we're talking about professional racing again, road cycling, but obviously the Giro d'Italia, that's in May, and there's always crazy weather in that part of the world. So it could be warm, could be cold. That's actually, I've not really looked into it too much personally, but actually the more you talk about it, the more interesting it sounds.
And I should say that when they get to that first control point, then the coordinates of the next control point, I think, are just printed on a sheet of paper and stuck to a tree. It's not a control point like you're picturing at TCR, where you
It's
have
kind of like an old
volunteers.
Trail Quest. I used to do those when I was a kid with a map. So who have we got riding then?
There are about almost 150 riders in total, 109 solo, 20 pairs. And in the solo riders, we've got Christoph Strasser, which I don't need much.
He's quite good, isn't he?
Much of an introduction. It will be interesting to see, though, how he handles the uncertainty of this race, because you can control a lot more on TCR, and that's probably one of the least controllable races.
Yeah, and Christoph is a guy who does a lot of preparation. He pre-rides a lot of sections. Obviously based in Austria, he's kind of fairly central in Europe, so he's able to do that. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see how that unknown, excuse the pun, element comes in.
And then the next rider whose name I've pulled out, and I think his character will suit this race down to the ground, is Robert Muller.
Yeah,
he did scratch the unknown race last year. But to give you an idea of how relaxed he is in his approach to these races, is that his first ultra was Transpyrenees race in 2022, and he turned up. I think he had some damage to his fork, either in transit or possibly in riding beforehand. But he went on to win the race on a hire bike, and he's a man who very little phases. So
he's done a lot of racing. He's a really interesting character because, like, I don't quite know his lifestyle. He always seems to be away. So I think he's an old school road racer. So you see him doing like stage races in like Asia and like the Caribbean. He'll just do like a week long stage race, like proper road racing, like criteriums, and then he'll just rock up at an ultra and just smash it. And I remember following the TCR a couple of years back, and I think he kind of decided that those real long ones are a bit too much. But 1,000K or so should suit him. He's also won the race across Austria a couple of times with a massive water bottle taped over his aero bars, like a fairing. He's that kind of quirky character, which does make me laugh. So, and I always remember, like, he always seems to race in a set of Coca-Cola shorts. Which is so, yeah. I mean, the sport needs characters like that, so that'd be interesting to see how he gets on. And we've also got Jochen Boehringer, who we mentioned just about the Tour Divide. So hopefully this will be a good kind of sort of prep for him.
One of his first road races, though. He's much more of an off-road racer.
He's a strong rider, though. He does a lot of kind of big audaxes and stuff. So he's ridden away from me numerous times on various races on massive climbs. But again, it's not all about pedaling on this. Well, in any of these races, there's much more than just the physical fitness. And I guess when you're planning on the fly, that's even more relevant, isn't it? So again, be interesting to see how that goes. Who else have we got?
The women's favourite who I picked out is Jana Kessenheimer. She was first woman at the unknown race last year, and she's obviously been first woman at TCR. She is an excellent climber. I think you can see it from her build. She really looks like a good climber.
I've been smashed on Climber Spur before in the Japanese Odyssey the other year. Yeah, she really is good. And she's got the experience as well. Didn't she have a very high overall finish as well last year in the unknown
I
race?
remember.
But I seem to think she was like top 10 overall. I might be making that up. But it wouldn't surprise me. She's a very classy rider. And also, like I say, looks like it's going to be mostly in Tuscany. I guess there will be a bit of flat, but there's not too much flat aside from the coastline in that part of in Italy. So it's a lot of short, sharp climbs, I'd imagine. And the Apennines, there are some quite high 2,000 meter climbs if you look hard enough. So could be some sustained climbing as well. So she could do quite well. Who else? We've got Victor Busquet. I think that's how you say it in French. Is that right?
I picked him out because he won Trans-Iberica's Trans-Pyrenees race last year, but he's also just come off the back of a couple of months touring all around Europe and Morocco. And I just thought he'd be potentially quite a good mindset. I think a race like this, given the unknowns and the uncertainties, it will suit a cycle tourist quite well.
Yeah, and to be honest, for these kind of events, I just don't think there's any better training than going for a really long tour.
Yeah,
you know, it just gets your body used to it and conditioned, and like you say, your mind and your mindset, and you know, you got to be thinking a certain way. If you train like an elite rider and come in thinking it's going to be like an elite race, you can soon get unwound by things not going your way or not going as planned. There's so many. I'll say it again. So many unknowns.
And the final rider whose name I picked out was Bruno Vicht. He's a rider who's come up. I've seen him around at a few races, and to note, he has top 5 finishes, Tour Volcano Sprint, Via Race, and Convoy, which all sit within a similar type of race. Via Race is obviously much longer, but those kind of all road similar distance.
Yeah, quite a bit of elevation, races. So you could do well.
Mm.
And also Hannah La Belestia, sorry for butchering your name, Hannah, who's obviously part of the Lost Dot organisation behind TCR and Accursed and Trans-Pyrenees. So we always like to point out when, or see how race organisers go in other organisers' races. It's a bit of a sentence, isn't it?
I bet she's taking notes. I bet she's got a notepad round with her.
Yeah, well, let's just make some new rumours. There'll be no Accursed race next year, but it'll be a random point to point in somewhere.
And the Jan Willem Bobbink, he is one of the organisers of the unknown race, and he will actually be riding this year. So I think they kind of take it in turns between the team to see who's going to be on the ground organising and who's going to be able to actually ride the event. Notoriously, the race was, I guess, brainstormed by a couple of guys at the end of Tour Volcano Sprint in 2022. And then they put on the first race in 2023. And I think it came about after a few drinks and a fair bit of sleep deprivation after the race. But they've done a cracking job.
Yeah, it's starting to get established now as one of the kind of the go-to early season races, isn't it? So, so yeah, it's going to be really cool to watch. So we'll sort of cover that a little bit in the next podcast. But closer to home, at least for us, is the Dales Divide. 18th of April, a couple of days after my birthday. So basically it's a coast to coast across Yorkshire through the Yorkshire Dales. I mean, it could be lovely and sunny. It could be absolutely horrendously rainy. It could be muddy, it could be dry, or it could be all of the above, all at the same time. Various factors, as Becky can attest to. You rode it in a couple of years ago now, didn't you?
2021. And we had the first 2 days, I think, was almost wall-to-wall sunshine. It was beautiful. And then there was a storm forecast, and it came in as hard as I was expecting it to. If I'd been a bit quicker and a bit less faffing, I would have stayed dry, but I didn't, and I was soaking wet.
Yeah, and I've been caught out exactly the same way. It was GB Jura, I think, on actually some of the course they use in Dales Divide. All very nice and lovely, and then just get absolutely smashed by rain, freezing cold. It's not super high elevation there, but it's high enough when the wind's blowing across there. So yeah,
those moors are exposed.
Yeah, and I mean, to be honest, it's been quite dry so far the last few weeks, and it's looking pretty good forecast up until the event. So it could well be relatively fast going underfoot, under wheel. Well, it's definitely underfoot if it's wet, because you end up walking through bog a lot, don't you? But yeah, it's kind of I guess it's kind of the season opener in the UK, and certainly the off-road season opener within Europe. We've only really had Atlas so far, which is obviously just South Europe in Northern Africa. So just to note that it starts on Arnside Pier, and Pat Hall, the mother of Mike Hall, she's normally sends a race off. It's kind of was made in sort of memory of Mike. He was a Yorkshire guy. Would have been very proud to have a race going across Yorkshire. So yeah, Pat always comes and waves the race off, which is really nice. And we've got some interesting riders. Again, mainly British. We from time to time get a few guest riders. But yeah, who's down to race then, Becky?
Well, it has one of the biggest turnouts that you see at any race, really. 255 riders
It's a good kind of
huge.
gateway race, isn't it? It's like it's not too difficult, but it's a nice first attempt, and
I
there's
can't
plenty
think
of bailouts if you need them.
exactly that. I can't think of many better races for a first time off-roader, especially.
Definitely, yeah. So yeah, it's always very popular, and of course on the Easter weekend. So if people are working, you don't really need to take too many days off work.
One of those riders who hopefully won't be needing any of those bailout options is Jenny Tuff. She's one of the women whose names I've picked out. And we haven't seen her on many start lists over the past few years. She was really big in the sport, I think, when it first started. But last year she did line up at the Highland Trail and race around Rwanda, and she finished both of those. She is, of course, Jenny Tuff. So I'll be curious to see how she gets on at the Dells Divide. She'll be racing against Kerry McPhee and Cara Dixon, who are both extremely competitive women, and they are there to race. I'd put Jenny more in the expeditionist adventurers category, but Kerry and Cara are racers. Kerry was first woman at the Highland Trail last year.
And it's going back again this year, I believe.
And is going back. So this is partly a warm-up race, but I don't think Kerry McPhee turns up to any race without the intention of riding to be the fastest there. And then Cara Dixon has finished first woman at Badlands and is possibly one of the strongest women on a bike in the UK at the moment.
And on the men's side of the field, again, we've got some pretty strong riders coming through. So Steve Bate, he's actually a Paralympian. He's, I think he's visually impaired. He's got a degenerative eye condition. I can't remember the exact medical term, but he's been to 3 or 4 Paralympics in a row. From Yorkshire, local lad, he'll know it all. Really, really strong rider, thoroughly nice guy as well. So he's one to keep an eye on. Of course, Angus Young, he's won the event before, and he set an FKT at one point. I don't know if Justinas broke it. I can't remember if Justinas said it first and then Angus broke it, or the other way around. But again, Angus doesn't turn up. He's already been flexing on social media. This is the classic Angus. I've done a 6-hour ride at 1,000 watts post, so he's going well. He's a very talented and very strong rider. We've got Alex Berry. He's podiumed in the Highland Trail 550 before. Cole Hops, probably one of the nicest guys in the whole scene. Again, he's not going to be ripping up off the front in the first few hours for sure, but he's a strong rider. He just doesn't stop. So yeah, he's definitely one to watch. And George Sales, actually, I was with George at the weekend, and he was, I think he's still got high aspirations of doing well at these races. He's a strong rider. He's got some racing pedigree, like his race in Belgium on the road. But he's only 24, and I think he's kind of, I think he's hungry for it. Certainly he was riding fast at the weekend when I was riding with him, and he's a very good mountain biker. So it'd be interesting to see how he gets on. So yeah, we'll be keeping an eye on those dots. The tracking is on Track Leaders, and we'll have a nice little chat about that next month once it's all over.
I picked out another name, and she won't mind me saying she's probably not a race favourite. But she's a colleague of mine at Dot Watcher, and that's Amanda Wishaw.
Favorite.
She is my favourite, definitely. She'll be my star dot on Track Leaders. And so anyone who sees her out there should wish her on. I think it's her first off-road ultra, and she'll be doing a few more.
Oh, cool. And it's also worth mentioning the Dells Divide is going to be the first event of the newly formed UK Triple Crown. Obviously, we've heard of the Triple Crown Challenge over in the USA, which is Tour Divide, Arizona Trail, and Colorado Trail. And the organisers of these three events have, I guess, sort of clubbed together and created the UK Triple Crown. So that will be the Dales Divide, the Highland Trail 550, and the North Wales 400. Is it 400? I think it is. So yeah, in order to complete the Triple Crown, you need to do all three within a calendar year. You don't necessarily have to do them on the event dates. You can do them as an ITT, which adds a nice bit of flexibility for people. So that's something to follow throughout the year. And we look forward to seeing who's the fastest rider come the end of August. Also coming up, although just into May, but we won't get to talk about it before the next podcast, is the Traka Adventure. Now, the Traka is it's more of a gravel event over in Girona, obviously a bit of a mecca for cycling in Catalonia, northern Spain. So the Traka Adventure is a 540 kilometer event, 10,000 meters of climbing. So not kind of super tough, and it runs alongside the Traka 360, which is more of like a big one-day gravel race. I've done that before myself. That normally it took me about 15 hours. And then they have a 200k and a 100k, and I think they also have a 50k. But it's becoming a real big kind of festival of cycling or gravel riding in Europe. It's beginning to look or get a bit of a reputation to be kind of the European version of Unbound. A lot of big trade companies come. So sponsored this year, headline sponsors are Canyon. So, that's a big headline, ticket sponsor. This will be a first edition for the Traka Adventure. It was actually introduced last year, but it rained, so they had to cancel it, which is...
It was at risk of being an actual adventure, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. Maybe the less said about that, the better. I think, I don't know, maybe the organisers they probably come more from the gravel side of things, and there was some high altitude, and I mean, it did properly hammer it down, and I just think they were worried about that many people going up high, bearing in mind that, I mean, it's a funny one, maybe it's a discussion to have. I mean, is it actually an ultra race? There's a fine line at a certain point between gravel and ultra. So, for example, the Unbound 200 is the big gravel race in the world. But they also have the Unbound XL, which I believe is a very similar distance to this.
Mm-hmm.
But to be honest, I wouldn't necessarily class that as an ultra race. It's just a really long gravel race. And I think probably the Traka kind of sits there. It's probably relevant for us to talk about because a lot of the same names are going to be taking part, who are then going to be taking part in some of the bigger races. And personally, myself, I'm going because it's a long ride, but it's not too long. You're not going to dig a massive hole and need 2 weeks to recover afterwards. But yeah, what do you think, Becky? At what point does a gravel race become an ultra and vice versa?
I don't think there's a distance you can put in it. I think it's more of an approach. So at what point do you have to start? At what point does the mid-pack start thinking about a sleep strategy? I think is a good point. So
because I guess some races, like the leaders, I mean, we saw it across Andes, which you'd probably think of as a bikepacking race, but I think the winner was like 48 hours last year, wasn't it?
Over 900k or so.
Jesus,
and I think Badlands is a good example because the fastest riders do not go in thinking they're going to sleep.
They don't take sleeping gear. I mean, they're basically out for a big day ride and ride through the night and hang on.
That's 800k?
Something like that, yeah. A lot of elevation.
Whereas a lot of riders, perhaps in the mid-pack or back of the pack, they would be taking probably quite a light, albeit sleep setup, and they'll be expecting to stop. So I think it steps into ultra when most of the pack have to start thinking about sleeping.
Yeah, so I guess the clue's in the name. It's an adventure. So I think most people are going for, we'll sleep and do it overnight, maybe 3 days for the slowest. But certainly the leaders are going non-stop, and I'm not thinking about stopping in it. I think I can try and get through. There's quite a lot of elevation early on, but then there's a really big long flat section, and you are in Spain. It's not like you're in Kyrgyzstan or somewhere remote like that. So resupply is relatively. You do have to think about it a little bit. But I guess these events are a good kind of gateway. We talked about Dales Divide. It's not too much different to that in a lot of respects, is it? The fast people are going to be fast.
And the fact that it has those shorter distances and its location does lend itself really well to being someone's first event.
Yeah.
And there is so much organisation around. So if something goes wrong, I know you're not supposed to rely on it, but for a first-time rider, it probably would give them some peace of mind to know that there are a lot of people watching the race and who are close by should they need them.
And much like Dales Divide, where it's an out and back, the Traka is a very kind of, it's quite a long, narrow, loop as such. So there's a lot of opportunities just to sort of cut back quite easily. I know it starts, goes north, and then drops all the way south below the loop, and it's probably 20 miles or so to cut back to Girona from like the halfway point if you wanted to. So these races definitely have a place. I guess it's a long gravel race if you're a gravel racer, and probably if you're just out for a nice jolly and an adventure, it's a bikepacking event. So yeah, I'll be out there anyway. So once that's over, we'll be able to report back. And it's looking like a fairly stacked race. I've not seen the full start list yet, but I know a few people. So Alex McCormack, obviously he just won the Atlas Mountain race. He's going out there. Marin de Saint-Exupéry, he's not confirmed yet, but he's hopefully going to be going. Cynthia Carson, again, we talked about her for TCR. Uber, he lives in Girona. I suspect he might be going. And then you get the gravel racers who, maybe want to give this kind of thing a go, and so they can tell everyone that they're an ultra racer. So yeah, that should be quite good. We'll definitely be talking about it, and I'll hopefully can report from the ground after that. Right. That's pretty much the races rounded up. We've got one more thing to discuss. So over to you, Beccy.
You've picked out the sale of Komoot as this episode's discussion and what it might mean for the sport of bikepacking, both racing and the non-competitive side of the sport. Komoot sold to a company called Bending Spoons at the end of March, and there's been a little bit of a shake-up about what might happen to the people who work at Komoot and also the events that and athletes who are supported by Komoot.
Yeah, so Bending Spoons, it's I guess the company name, but something more relevant that you might know is like they own Evernote and WeTransfer, Bright Cove, Meetup, these kind of I guess it's a tech company or tech investment company. However, with all these existing companies, the pattern has been that the company has been brought, and then kind of I think the word is significant cuts have been made, which essentially means like 60-70% of the staff being laid off. In some instances, all the staff being laid off. So that does kind of open some question marks about Komoot have been supportive of quite a few events, such as the women's rallies and the Lost Dots races, amongst others. So I guess it does put a bit of uncertainty into a lot of these events when the bike industry is, I probably would say, in a spot of bother in terms of marketing budgets. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it kind of unravels. And we both know people that work there and are involved in the events.
I tried to get some information out of some friends who work there, but the feeling I get at the moment is that people are just quite scared that every person there is going to lose their job, and finding somewhere else to work. How easy will that be? Especially as you mentioned that cycling companies at the moment are quite tight on their budgets. So it's a really unsettling time for the people who work at Komoot, and it sounds like the way that they were told about this by the owners of Komoot was just a little saddening, and I think they've been left in the dark for a while.
Yeah, I suppose in hindsight, from a business point of view, I guess it's kind of obvious when you think about it, because obviously we had the huge boom in bikepacking during COVID, which has been the undoing of the industry. But for these kind of tech companies, they put all the money in, and you saw Komoot absolutely everywhere. Just spending money, sponsoring all these riders, all these events. And then there was a couple of years ago, you heard rumours, a lot of people having everything cut. And in hindsight, you imagine they've got a massive growth, and then suddenly they're cutting back on their marketing budget. Because if you spend less, you can make the books at the end of the year look better, and probably inflate the value for sale. And it looks like they've just sold off to this company. So whether it's a good thing or not, obviously all the official statements say it's to help bring it to the next level. But if you're getting rid of all the staff that know all, are the eyes and ears on the ground and part of the community, and it's taken over by a load of IT bots, then it's just not going to be the same, is it?
No, we'll see. I think what is quite up in the air is how much of Komoot's the bedrock of Komoot is really its community, both in the technology itself, like the way they have their highlights on the route planning, but also in who their staff are. And a lot of people know them, and they represent Komoot events all around Europe. So I think we're all a bit unsure about what Komoot will look like in a couple of years' time.
Yeah, I mean, it could just be like go quite generic, which is a shame. I mean, there is still obviously other platforms out there and stuff, which may take over. But like personally, I've never used Komoot extensively, but I know a lot of people do, and a lot of people rely on it, and it's very kind of user intuitive. I've always been on rumours, which is a bit more. You need to sort of know what you're looking at.
Yeah.
And
But
I've been using it
Komoot's-
since 2013, so it's kind of I struggle with Komoot more than rumours, but
But
it's just
Komoot potentially is
gateway,
better
isn't it?
for an entry-level rider.
Exactly. So yeah, it's undoubtedly going to make an impact. Just have to see how it goes, and hopefully everyone who's affected in terms of employment, because it is people's incomes. That's the kind of the overriding thing. Apart from two guys who are probably very rich right now, two new millionaires. Yeah, we'll have to see how that works out. And well, hopefully, like the events, if they've got signed contracts, at least they'll be okay for the time being, because obviously they can't really go and breach signed contracts without kind of some consequences. But yeah, it's not great, is it? So
No.
we'll see how it all pans out.
I think it's worth noting that it doesn't necessarily set any worrying precedent for bikepacking or cycling firms in general. This, I think, is specific to Komoot being a tech company. It's not a manufacturer.
Yeah. And I know talking about Komoot, but Rival GPS, they've supported a lot of my race coverage, and I've actually met some of the guys who invest in that, and they are, there is still, they care about it and their riders as well. So, there is still, it's not like everything's been sold to tech companies and, we're going to be integrated into the rest of the world. There's still plenty of, essentially bike riders still rule the world in our little bubble. So it's good to know at least.
Quite right. So that feels a bit of a downer, or a bit of uncertainty for the end of the episode.
Yeah. However, we are certain we will be back next month, probably.
Oh yeah, we're all right.
So next month will be into May, and the season is going to be really starting to kick off. We're going to start upping the regularity of our podcasts, just mainly so we can cover everything, because there's so many races coming. So next episode, like I said, I shall be at the Traka adventure. So that's the first edition. So we'll have a nice discussion about that. And I can tell everyone what it's like to have your head kicked in by a load of gravel professionals. And we'll also have there's a load of races at the end of May that are kicking off, isn't there, Beccy?
Yeah. We'll be in the next episode picking up previews of the Accursed race, which is Lost Dots race in the Balkans. That's the second edition this year. The Highland Trail 550, we are many years after the second edition, actually. This has been going on for a long time. And then a Hellenic mountain race, which will be Nelson's, or the mountain race's second race of the year.
Yeah, and I shall be out in Greece for that. So yeah, looking forward to it.
You'll actually be filming or recording the next episode in Greece.
Well, I'll be home that one, and then hopefully we'll do a roundup of Hellenic while I'm in Greece. Lots of really good stuff to look forward to coming up on the podcast. So if you like listening to us, and you're still listening at this time of the podcast, thanks. A big thank you to Redshift. Don't forget to check those guys out if you like funky handlebars, like Beccy. She's going to be getting her order in straight away. And yeah, like us, subscribe, follow us on your podcast player, and it'll be goodbye for me, and see you in the next episode, Beccy.
Yeah, thanks very much, Josh. I'll see you next time.
Yeah, see ya.